We're recording. Happy week 7. Oh my gosh.
Woo, woo.
Week 7. It's amazing. Awesome. So I'm going to hand it off to Chris, who will get us started.
Cool. All right. So this week, y'all were tackling a little bit of a more different issue from what the typical workflow has been. And so I think we're really curious to have you talk through the issues that you created in GitHub in order to track the new work that you're going to take on for this. And it would be interesting to learn about what the process was like for you guys or for y'all, and what worked, maybe what didn't, if there were any things. And then maybe if you could show us some of the designs that you've come up with too, and maybe from there we can talk about what next week's going to look like. So. Anybody want to volunteer to get us started?
Well, I will get started. I'm going to be doing the screen share for our demo today. Let's look at that up. Okay, can everyone see that all right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, so we all started the week by individually creating mood boards to brainstorm and to gather ideas about the direction we wanted to move in for the design of the application. And we got, ideas on icons, typography, images, colors, all of those design topics. And there were 2 resources recommended in the issue for this week for creating mood boards. One was Canva and one was Milanote. And while we tried both, the consensus seemed to be that Milanote was more user-friendly, easier to get started with, easier to dive in and begin using. And so that seemed to be kind of the favorite. You can see some Milanote designs right here and some of the words we chose for our tone, typography, those sorts of things. And Dee is going to talk more about the design decisions we made as a team and some of the reasons that we made those decisions.
Yeah, so after we had created our mood boards, we kind of came together for a collective brainstorming session. So we have this Google Doc that helped us kind of map out our thoughts of how we wanted the app to look, and then also divvying up the workload for this week. And so we all agreed that we wanted our app to be clean, fun, cartoonish, punny, and inviting. And as far as typography, we haven't decided on which one we're going to choose, but we like the Quicksand font and the Fire Sans font. Again, we haven't decided which one exactly, but we're getting closer. So, and these are like these 2 color palettes pretty much exemplify like how we want the app to look. It's kind of bright. It's fun to us. So these are the color palettes that we're probably going to go with. And for iconography, we definitely want to make use of icons like the little shopping cart with the plus sign, and also like the plus sign icon in general. We feel that those are pretty intuitive and the user will know like what's going on and how to use them. We also decided on using a grocery bag as the logo for the app, which you'll get to see in a little bit. And in our demos, you've seen like how like the background color of the whole element changes based on the purchase. But instead, to kind of clean it up a little bit, we're just going to use the left border. That's going to be colored instead. And you'll also get to see what that's going to look like. And as far as cleaning up further, we're going to use round checkboxes instead of square checkboxes. This is just kind of an example of what's going on, like how it's going to look, except we're not going to use this example specifically, but the round is what we're going to go with. And we have some resources linked of what we could do with those round checkboxes and how we can further customize them. And we decided we're going to use a little bit of both of vanilla CSS and Material UI. And we chose Material UI because it had a lot of the icons that we liked, as well as it seemed pretty customizable as far as the other, like against Bootstrap or like chakra. So we're going to go with Material UI. And to split up the work, half of us worked on wireframing and the other half worked on the user stories. And as far as wireframing, I'm pretty sure you guys are all familiar with like Figma. We decided to use an application called Whimsical instead. It's more user-friendly than Figma, and it was a lot easier to get started. So we decided to go with Whimsical over Figma for the wireframing. It's just a lot easier to use and get started. So I'm going to pass it off to Rachel, and she's going to talk more about what went into the wireframes.
Thanks, Dee. Yeah, like Dee said, this Whimsical was a lot easier than Figma. A lot of drag and drop made it really easy to group, ungroup, and just from the get-go was easy to, I had never used it before, and just start working away. So we have put together a couple of our wireframes to add item view. We have our form. As you can see, there's that little grocery bag icon in the left corner. That's going to be like our home button to return to the welcome screen, which is the one that we're still figuring out exactly how we want that to look. But we also have an idea for our loading screen over to the right. And we really liked, Brittany had found these when she was doing her Canva, and they're just little cute food puns. So we had the idea of like doing just like a random generator and iterate through the different images so that it'll be a fun little loading screen. It'll be a different little food pun while the user's waiting. And then down for our list view, here you can see a lot of the things that Dee had talked about, the decisions we made. So there's that left side of the list item view has the color, the round check boxes, and that'll also like have the color with it. There's our little trash delete icon, then a little menu at the bottom for the navigation with some more icons. So just really putting all the things we talked about and made decisions on together. And then I did also a phone view of it, so we could see that we really want to focus on the mobile responsiveness as well. So I think it really transitions well for both. And with that, I will hand it over to Viet to talk about the user stories that he and Brittany created this week.
Thanks. So yeah, Brittany and I used the doc that Dee had gone through, and we put ourselves into like the shoes of the user to create these stories. We used the template that we've seen over the past 7 weeks now to create these stories. So we went through, added 4 stories there, and each story has an AC. So for instance, for the color palette, we wanted it to pass accessibility. Those are one of the acceptance criteria for the typography. Sorry, Brittany, you're just on the typography there. The typography, we wanted it to be consistent and legible. For the icons, we wanted them to be universally understood. So anybody that goes to the app, obviously Rachel had pointed out the plus sign means add, the trash can delete. And we wanted the check circles to be clearly marked when they are unchecked and checked. So just like things that makes it easy to use for anybody really. Yeah, and so we broke those down into just 4 other user stories on top of the one that the loading message that Brittany had written. And yeah, that's pretty much what we did this week. So what questions do you all have for us?
First of all, I'm blown away by how much y'all accomplished and just how you were able to take the task and run with it. We weren't really sure exactly what to expect, I think, and I'm just really impressed with how much you were able to dive in. So nicely done.
Yeah, I'll definitely second that. I think it looks great. It looks like there are a lot of things thought through, and it looks also really coherent in terms of a look and feel. It looks really awesome. Done a lot of good work.
Thanks.
Yeah, I love that. I love how you're taking your time to make the decisions and not rushing the decisions and then jumping right into code, because I think that's easy to fall into that as developers. Like, we just want to get to the work that we really know how to do, maybe like the work that we're more comfortable doing. And I love what you've come up with. It is so much fun. It's so adorable. I'm beyond excited. It's so cute. Yeah, I just really love how you've planned it out. So Mike, actually, I'm curious, would you, instead of going to the learning module first, do you want to talk about like next week first, and like how we might, like what next week might look like for them? It just feels like a natural segue, I guess.
Sure. And you may have to help me out here because this.
So yeah,
huh?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, one idea that I had is maybe we could do a little impromptu grooming session on some of the stories. Or what were you about to say?
Yeah, or I was wondering, I'm curious what your plans are for next week, like how you're dividing up the issues, who is going to be reviewing what. I think for this last week, I mean, we can all make this decision together, but since there's going to be a lot of work flying around, you might not want participant and mentor review on everything. Do you know what I mean? Like, this part, I feel like you all can really own. And maybe if you want help and or review in certain things, of course, we can do that. But it might help you move a little bit faster if there isn't mentor review on top of everything. I guess those are my questions. Like, what do you think next week might look like for you in terms of workflow and that kind of thing?
Well, we usually get together after the sync and kind of talk about, you know, what our week looks like. So I kind of figured that we were going to do that. And then I don't know what the plan was for the user stories, like who was going to take on what, but I kind of figured like that was going to take place like after this. I mean, I'm not sure, but that's what it's.
And were y'all thinking about pairing on them or splitting them off and doing individual work, or what were the thoughts there?
I think it depends on like this week, everybody was a lot more busy, or this past week. So I think it kind of depends on one, like everybody's kind of schedules and that. And then two, I think some might, you know, maybe pairing would be better, but not necessarily all of them.
Yeah, I would agree, Rachel. I think it depends on what's going to be, since there are several issues and some of them maybe are a little, I don't want to say smaller, because I feel like, knock on wood, you always think it's the simple things that are going to be, or it's always when you think things are going to be simple and easy that they like are not. But I feel like some of these, it might make sense to tackle individually, and some that are a little more challenging would be great to pair up on. We haven't really had that discussion, like to pin that down, but that was kind of where my thinking was at as well.
That a lot of the times when essentially we're starting a sprint here, and there's a bunch of stories. And a lot of the times you would start off before you get into the sprint, and you'd go through each of them and try to estimate, like, is this one really big? Is this one really small? And it's really, really hard to do. And even if you're very used to it, it can be really hard and you can be way off. But then based on that, you can try to kind of break them up, I guess. And the traditional way to estimate is based on Fibonacci numbers. So you'd be like, this is a 1 versus that one's a 3. That one's a 5. But are there any in looking at them where you feel like this one is going to be huge, or this one maybe has dependencies? Like, do any of the stories, do you feel really influence the others, and you need to top load that one and get it done quickly, or anything like that?
I personally am a little concerned about the loading screen because of the challenges we ran into when we were trying to get that functional before. And we did find that the things we were trying were not actually accomplishing the function that we wanted to achieve. So that, I think, in my head is going to be a more difficult task because I'm anticipating running into some of those same challenges.
What were the challenges with that?
It
Didn't work.
It was, yeah, it just didn't work. Like we kind of tried to build in the logic where if we had list items, then we weren't getting it was the message that says you don't have any items yet.
Okay.
But even though we were trying to build in that logic to check for that, we were still getting that message when we were coming to the application for the first time with an existing list, or when we were submitting an item and returning to the list view, we'd still see that flash each time. We could not get the loading screen properly. We could get the loading message in there, but it was in there with the message that said you don't have any items yet.
Okay.
So there's a potential, kind of blocky issue, right? That can try to maybe tackle that one early and reach out to mentors to when you're feeling blocked, and we can kind of get past that. Yeah. And then the rest, do you feel like they're all very independent from each other, can be done without not waiting on one to be done before the other, and then also relatively equal sized?
Somewhat. Sort of. I don't know. Like, I mean, they're different style things. So there's going to be an initial, like someone's going to have to do something or we're going to have conflicts. So that's the only thing. It'll just be like, who's going to push first and then go from there, kind of.
Which you're all old hats at that by now, right? Cool. Yeah. So it
Yeah,
sounds like,
I'm sorry, Mike.
oh, I was just going to say, it sounds like going to meet after this and kind of break up the stories and figure it out from there, right? Cool.
Cool. As you get into it, sorry. Don't be afraid to break stories down further if you find it's too big. Like you're in it and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna get done with this. Tear off a chunk of it and turn that into another story. It feels better to be able to move through things a little bit more quickly sometimes, rather than to be with one big chunk of work for a long period of time. So don't be afraid to break things off. Don't be afraid to decide that something is maybe not something we're going to do right now. Like you might get into a place where, like, I'm not sure that we can get this piece of it done right now, and that's okay. Like it's okay to set things aside and be like, this is for milestone 2. You know what I mean? So don't be afraid to make those decisions too.
And also one small thing, just in looking really quickly through some of the stories, is a lot of times it's a really good idea to make sure that you have a very clearly defined definition of done. And I usually try to say to myself, or even write it like, we will know that we are done when, and then write the rest of that statement out. And that'll help you be able to move on from a ticket, right? And if it's very open-ended, then you can end up spending half the week on it without realizing it. Yeah.
I've got a couple ideas I can throw out there too. in terms of talking about the dependencies of the application and like the dependencies of the execution order of the tickets, we know that we're choosing to use Material UI as the framework in a similar way to how we chose like Firebase as our database framework. And then we had like a ticket to install it and make sure that it works. And then subsequent tickets used it, right? You may end up finding that something similarly could be beneficial for Material, because having Material installed and like working correctly is going to be a dependency for like your icons, your checkboxes, and any other UI elements that you want to use from that library. And so getting that installed and working correctly like early in the week will, I think, set you up for success with other stuff. The other thought that I had too was I loved the mock-ups. I thought that those were awesome. But it seemed like there were maybe still some ideas or work within the mock-ups that like maybe weren't captured yet fully in the tickets. Does that kind of seem fair? So you may already totally know what I'm like saying here, but just you might want to kind of go through a second pass and file some additional tickets for like the changes in the layout and like certain pieces that you're going to need from the mock-ups as well. And some of those pieces might make sense to kind of do early on so that the like skeleton and overall structure is there. And then you kind of like layer like the typographic or color settings sort of on top of that skeleton, you know, as you build it out. So, but those are just suggestions at the end of the day, like it's up to whatever you want to do and whatever works for you, so.
Cool.
I see multiple people writing things down. I guess that was a good suggestion.
Yeah.
I thought they were really good suggestions.
Cool.
I do really like, I like that idea of breaking the Material UI down into that. First, just get it installed and make sure it works.
Yeah.
And then go deeper with it. And also, I really like, for me, it's really easy to remember if there's like a sentence you're finishing in order to write something out. So like with commit messages, it's, you know, like this will, and then you finish that sentence, is kind of what I heard that stuck with me. And so I like that. We will know that we are done when, and then just, you know, not being afraid to say maybe this is too big and we need to break this down. So yeah.
Cool. Any other questions or thoughts?
It looks so cute. I'm so excited. It looks really cute.
Yeah, I'm stoked to see what y'all come up with. And also, you're going to come up with what you come up with. If it's not 100%, you know, to the mock-ups at the end of the day, that's cool too. But I'm super stoked just to see what you can end up doing.
Yeah.
And I will second what Lauren said about that oftentimes I have a tendency, and I think a lot of developers do, to start designing while you're developing. I think it's really cool to have designs to work towards. Yeah.
Maybe if this works really well, we should just do this as the exercise like the first 2 weeks of Collab Lab, and then we have mock-ups for like the rest of the period to just like build from, you know?
Yeah, that's true. That's actually a good idea.
I do feel like, as much as I like having the design and the mock-ups, it was so much easier to focus on like just getting the functionality in, because we kept, like, as we were meeting up, we kept saying like, oh, well, let's not style yet. Let's not style yet, because we knew we had this chunk of time. So that did kind of not to, I like that idea, but also there's that other element where it was like, normally I get super distracted and try to design way too much too early on and like build the styling in as I'm doing the functionality. And it was a really good experience these past 6 weeks to just be like, not going to do that yet. Don't worry about that yet.
I was impressed by everyone's ability to do that. Just saying, nope, just we'll leave that how it looks, how it is.
Yeah, that iterative development flow was great. And it's really interesting because like, who knows where y'all are going to end up working. You could end up working at a startup that's another like 4 group of engineers, or you could go to like a company with thousands of engineers, and maybe someone's going to come to you with like this massive plan that you're going to go execute against, or maybe there's going to be no plan and you're going to have to make the plan up as you go, right? Like, so all these different ways are kind of good training, I think, for a variety of different options that you might actually face out there in the real, you know, like the work world. So.
Cool.
All right. Any other questions or comments before we move on to learning module? Nope. Okay. I'm super excited about this one. So with this one, there's a little bit of presentation. I want to look at a couple of websites, and then I have a little bit of a demo for actually something that I came across today when I was working on a little side project that I'm working on. And I'll show you how to use a tool that I like to use a lot that helped me kind of solve my accessibility problem that I was having. So I hope this is helpful and useful for you. Okay, so today we're talking about accessibility, the what, why, and how. Please tell me if you can't see my screen. Oftentimes you'll see accessibility abbreviated as A11Y. And this is something that we do a lot in engineering, is abbreviating things like Kubernetes, right, is CATES. And what's the other one that I see all the time? Internationalization is I18N, right? And really, for the longest time, I and probably many other people thought this said ally, like, oh, I'm a friend to people with disabilities, and that's not what it means. It means that we're getting rid of these 11 letters in the middle. It's just A11Y. I, for the longest time, thought that. So, but you'll see that all of the time. So what is web accessibility? Web accessibility from Wikipedia says it's the inclusive practice of ensuring there are no barriers that prevent interaction with or access to websites on the World Wide Web by people with physical disabilities, situational disabilities, and socioeconomic restrictions on bandwidth and speed. So when sites are correctly designed, developed, and edited, generally all users are going to have equal access to that information and the functionality. The W3C, which is the World Wide Web Consortium, maintains a working group, and they are the people that decide what the web accessibility standards are. So they publish those standards, they meet every so often. In the United States, the Section 508 is the codified law that decides, that requires government agencies to make their websites accessible to people with disabilities. So if you're interacting with any kind of government websites, like state government websites, generally public university websites, they have to meet a certain level of compliance for accessibility. And they publish what are called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or people will say WCAG or WCAG, right? And there are different levels of compliance. There's like 2.0 and 2.1. I think they're working on the latest like 3.0 release of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and different organizations have to meet different levels of accessibility. But that's what the laws say about accessibility in terms of government websites. So some people with disabilities will access their websites using assistive technologies. This is often what we think about when we think about web accessibility. So these kind of technologies include screen readers, right? Screen magnifiers, speech input like speech to text, assistive keyboards, braille displays. Popular screen readers include Nvda and JAWS, which are for Windows. And then Mac, of course, has VoiceOver built in. So Nvda is an open source program that you can download to your computer. JAWS is pretty expensive. It is something that a lot of people use. And like I mentioned, I think last week, is that different screen readers it's like different browsers, like they work a little bit differently. So if I'm testing and I'm testing on, I have a Macintosh, but if I'm testing on a Windows machine and I'm using Nvda and I'm testing the screen reading, it's different, that it reads out different information and you'll get different bugs with different screen readers. So it's important, if this is the kind of work that you do, it's important to be able to have access to all of those different tools. So why do we need to make websites accessible? So really, it's because it's the right thing to do. It's important to provide equal access to information that we can get on the World Wide Web. It's important. It's one of the most important things that we have as a society, right? This access to information is, I can't imagine a time anymore when I didn't have the internet to give me information to find out what I needed to know and to make doctor's appointments and to know what's going on with the coronavirus pandemic, right? This information is important to be able to access. You may be legally obligated to make your website accessible. There was a very famous lawsuit against Domino's Pizza, for example, that probably many of us know about, that they were found liable for not having a website that was accessible. And of course, government websites need to meet certain standards, public schools, etc. This is so fascinating to me. So more people in the US access websites using assistive technology. And that's not even just like, you know, keying through a website, it's using like JAWS or Nvda. So more people in the US access websites with that assistive technology than live in Canada, which I find pretty stunning. So some people estimate that 20% of website visitors have some sort of disability. And really, if you think about it, almost all of us will have some kind of disability at some point in our lives. And in addition to that, making your web pages more accessible for people with disabilities actually makes it better for all of us to use, right? So if I don't have a disability, but this website is very accessible, it makes it easier for me to use. So Microsoft has a lot of really great information about accessibility and inclusive design. And these are personas that they've come up with when they are thinking about their designs, like who am I designing for in this particular instance? And when you think about it, there are all kinds of ways that we can have a disability. So you can be permanently disabled, you can be blind all of the time. You can be temporarily disabled, maybe you have a broken arm, right? So that's just for a short period of time. Situational disability, this can be, like I experienced this after I had both of my children, right? You always have a baby in your arm, so you can't access the information on your computer the same way. And you always have carpal tunnel because you're carrying your children around all of the time. You really do, like, and you have to be able to do everything with one hand. So that's like a situational disability. So all of us will experience kind of this inability, or not an inability, but you need to access the information in a different way than you're used to, right? So making websites more accessible makes it better for every single person throughout life. So how do we make our websites accessible? So probably the number one thing that you can do to ensure that your website is accessible is to use valid semantic HTML. And what that means is a hypertext markup language has gazillions of tags, right, that are designed for specific purposes. Like a button is used, when you click on it, something happens, right? When you have information at the very top of the page that needs to be very prominent and gives information about like the title of the page, that's a header. We have bodies, we have main, we have section, we have articles. Using that semantic HTML, using the tag that's for the specific purpose will go probably 80% of the way to making sure that your website is accessible. It tells the browser what's supposed to happen. It tells that assistive technology, what is this thing, right? That is what gives that assistive technology the information that it needs to be able to translate that information. One really simple thing to do is to always include alt attributes on your image tags. I'm using Aria attributes if necessary. And Aria stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. So it's a set of attributes that you can give to your HTML elements that provide additional information about that particular element if it's not self-descriptive, right? So for example, a button, when it's rendered, will have a role of button. Sometimes a particular tag is being, if it has to, for some reason, be used in an outside of the box way, we can give it some kind of Aria attribute to help assistive technology understand what it's really supposed to be doing in that instance. But honestly, Uraima Esteves from New York Times gave a really great talk at Women of React. She's a huge accessibility engineer, tells us that the best Aria is no Aria at all, like #1 semantic HTML, and to use Aria as little as possible, right? Use that as a last resort, I guess. This is a huge one. It makes, this is something that I do all the time when I'm testing my websites. If you can access everything that you need to do via your keyboard rather than using a mouse or a trackpad, you've gone a very, very, very long way to making sure that that website is accessible. So making sure all of your content, you're able to do every single thing that you need to do using the keyboard only will make sure that will not guarantee, but will get you really far along the way to making sure your website is accessible. Ensure that your content and tab ordering makes sense. I think that came up kind of early on in the process when I remember we were doing like a column reverse CSS thing on a flex displayed container. And that kind of reversed the order of something, but it wouldn't necessarily have been as obvious to assistive technology. So ensuring that that content ordering really makes sense. I'm using sufficient color contrast. There are all kinds of tools on the web that we can use to make sure that our color contrast is okay. And then one other important thing is to don't only use color to give information about a particular state in the application. And again, this relates to those checkboxes, right? We wanted to make sure that they had an Aria label. We were using color to signify what state that checkbox is in, but we also wanted to make sure that people who don't see color, people who are colorblind or use assistive technology, can also understand the state of that checkbox. Skip that. Excuse me. So there are all kinds of tools that we can use. Axe is one that you can integrate. It's either you can use it like with ESLint, or you can use it as just a CLI tool. It doesn't catch a ton of things. It's not capable of checking a ton of things, but it's a good way to automate some things. So for example, if you are coding an input that should have a label all of the time, it will make sure it can go through your code and make sure that you always are using a label with an input, and it just automates that for you. So that it is a good tool to use. Just know that it only gets you about 30% of the way there. There are some tools that are guided audits. Some of these are a little bit more expensive than free. Guided audits, such as what's built into a tool called Accessibility Insights. We had a presentation on this tool earlier on in our tech talks about the person who's creating this Accessibility Insights, and it's an application that will kind of look through your application and give you information about the accessibility challenges that it has. There are lots of great companies that help other businesses make sure that they're websites are accessible. One example that Andrew really loves is Fable Tech Labs. They do audits, and they many businesses can do remediation for you or help you make a plan for remediation, right? How can we fix these things? Because sometimes you're really in over your head, right? There are lots of times that I've gone into a website and it's very not accessible. There are lots and lots and lots of challenges. And it's hard to know where to start, right? How can I make this at least a little bit better? So a company like that can really help you. Again, this is my #1 tip, is be able to navigate your website and do everything by a keyboard. That will really get you a long way of the way. Use a tool like Wave. This is what I'm going to demo a little bit later. It's just a little Chrome extension, and it gives you great information about your page. And then something that people don't necessarily think about. So I used to work at the University of Minnesota, where accessibility compliance is a requirement. It was really great because we had a working group that met once a month, and we could talk about accessibility and all different kinds of topics surrounding it. And they have a disability and inclusion office at the U, where they do testing of all of the websites. There's a UX lab where they do testing. So it's really important part of doing that job. And I've learned a ton just because I was surrounded by a lot of experts. So it was really great. So one of the presentations was about content accessibility. So, and when I say content, I mean like the text that's on the page, right? The stuff that I'm going to read on my website. So Hemingway app, just go here. Can you still see that? I opened it up in a new window. Yeah. So Hemingway app allows you to copy paste the text, the content of your website in here, and it will make sure that it's basically what we want to design for is getting to a 6th grade reading level, which seems like, oh, it's really low. But not only is it great for people who have cognitive disabilities or maybe aren't neurotypical, right? Focus is a challenge. It makes it easier for everybody, even who don't have those challenges, to access the content that they need very quickly and simply, right? It just makes it easier to get the information that you need on the web. So this helps all of your users, not just people that maybe need to have it at a 6th grade reading level. Anyway, you paste your content in here, and it will tell you how to make that content a little bit better, a little bit easier to access. Hemingway app. Yes, I would like to use that. Cool. All right, so we have 15 minutes left. Let me walk through a couple of demos, and then we'll have time for questions. So Starbucks is a company that spent a ton of time working on the accessibility of their website. So let me just show you a few kind of neat features to look for when you're looking at a website and you want to see, okay, how are they doing their accessibility? How are they making this website accessible? And are they doing a good job? One way you can tell is the first time you go to a website, let me refresh, hit tab, and this little button pops up that says skip to main content. That lets me know as a developer and a person that they've thought through those people that need to navigate with a keyboard or with assistive technology. So with this button, I'm able to skip all of this navigation. Maybe I've been to this website before and I don't need to go through the navigation, but I just want to hop down to the content in the middle of the page. So usually you can tell, you go to a website, hit tab, and if they have this kind of skip to main content, a skip link show up, you know that that's they've spent time thinking about their accessibility. So, and then let me show you this Wave tool. So I have it plugged in as a Chrome extension. And I run it on the page, and then it will give me a summary of all kinds of information about that page related to accessibility. It will tell me about any errors on the page, any contrast issues, anything that maybe could be better with these alerts. features, things that are good about what your page is doing. It'll tell you what the structural elements are, the HTML elements that are on the page, and it will tell you where you're using Aria, right? So Starbucks, I mean, this is really, really, really impressive. Most websites that you go to are not going to have zero errors on them. And you can go into the details and it'll give me some more information about what's going on. So I can look, okay, so one of the alerts it's saying that in the Starbucks site, they're using long alternative text, and then it'll take me there, like this is where it is. And then when I click on it, then I can look at the code, right? And it takes me right into the code where exactly the problem is. So here the alt tag is just a little bit too long. Like the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines will tell you, make alt image tags really succinct. And if there's text, it's for this, if there's text close to the image that gives description, you don't need to give a huge alt text description, just enough to let the user know. So they're just saying, you know, maybe that text is a little long for that alternative text. But this is a super handy tool because it gives you specific information, takes you to the place on the page that is the problem, and then even takes you into the HTML to show you where it is. So that's kind of neat. So this is one that I use all of the time. It's one of my favorite tools. Okay, so turn that off. So as contrast, the New York Times also does a really nice job, but they do have a few more problems. So let's do, they also have the skip link. So if I would tab into it, they have a couple different skip links. One is to like skip to this menu. One is to skip to the content, and like one is to skip down to this fat footer at the bottom. So that's kind of a neat feature. You can imagine that a site like the New York Times that updates quite a bit might have a few more accessibility challenges just because it's churning quite a bit. So they do have 6 errors on the page, which again, honestly is not that much. They do have a lot of contrast errors, which points to kind of a design challenge. Maybe the designers won out on that, on that battle. So I am seeing that there's like missing alternative text for an image, right? That's a really straightforward and easy one, but you can imagine how a site like the New York Times, that would happen semi-often for them. Empty link, empty heading, very low contrast, right? Those seem to be the biggest issues for New York Times. But really overall, not too terrible, pretty decent New York Times. All right, so then let me show you what I was working on today that I ran into this issue. So a little story behind this lovely website that right now just has Schitt's Creek videos on it. My older son, this is my older son, Hal, so cute, is a cellist, and his teacher is really sick right now. And they have a virtual recital coming up. So I told David, I was like, you know, let's, Tony and I, my husband and I will take it over for you. You won't have to worry about a thing. We'll plan it because it's really not his thing, right? And then he can get the rest and recuperation that he needs because he's got a lot on his mind. So I'm putting together this website of the kids' recital videos, and it's going to put in, you know, pull in their name and the pieces that they're playing, right? So what I wanted to do, I did a quick like accessibility audit of it. And I put hang on, I gotta restart my server here. One moment. All right, let me refresh one more time just to make sure. Okay, so I have an error on the page now, so you can see how it helped me remediate it. So let me hit that again. 4 errors, okay? So when I ran the accessibility checker, it was giving me this error because I wanted to switch this, this button was originally, it had text on it, and I wanted to just change it to an icon button. So I wanted it to just be an icon to kind of clean up the screen a little bit, but now it doesn't have text on it anymore, and it doesn't give any kind of information, like what is this button even doing? And maybe even that icon isn't super clear. But I can look at the details and it says, oh, it's an empty button. There's no text associated with that button. I really don't know what that's doing. Right, and then I click over there. Let's see if it'll show me in the code. Yeah, it's just saying, oh, there's no information. You need to fix this button. So I Googled on how to make an icon button that doesn't have any text associated with it accessible. So I'll show you how to remediate that real quick. All right, so here's my button, this styled button. And inside of it is this icon. And what we need to do, first, you can give it some text just inside of a span, and it just has this hidden attribute on it. So that won't even, I don't even have any CSS written with that hidden. It just won't show up on the page. Number one, that's the first thing. So that associates text with this button. And then I just give it this Aria labeled by, and then I match Aria labeled by to this ID that I have. So if I save that, out of the way. Cool, and now let's see. Right, it's simple as that. Like I just added that hidden text, gave it an Aria labeled by. Like this isn't something that I really knew off the top of my head, right? It was something that I had to look for, but this tool made it really easy. There's lots of reference information and like where to link out to and all of the different levels for the WCAG guidelines, so you can read what the specs say it should be doing. So it's just a really handy tool. So here are our list of resources, which I won't go by, but they're, I won't go through, but they are the resources that we talked about during the presentation, and I'll share this out. But just know that it's actually a really fun development challenge to make your websites accessible. I have a lot of fun working to make sure that my websites are accessible. And again, it really makes it better for everybody. I find myself, rather than using my trackpad or using a mouse, that I navigate by keyboard quite a bit now. And so having a really accessible website just makes it so much easier. All right, thank you so much. What questions do you have?
Not a question, but just want to say that that was just wonderful. I love all of the resources that you included in that, and Wave is amazing. So excited to use that.
It's a really good tool. I love, it can get kind of busy. Let me just show one more feature that makes it a little bit easier to read, because you'll go into a website and you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And I can't read, like all of the information is too hard to read. So you can turn off different things. So it will just show you certain messages, right? So it's not quite as busy. It makes it just a little bit easier to read.
Yeah, I'm super excited about Wave. That looks really, really cool. And at my company, we're horrible with accessibility and have been trying to figure out where to get started. And I'm wondering, like, do you feel as though Wave is a solid, that the evaluation that it does is solid enough to, I guess, make that as a metric that you can say, hey, in order to have a story done, you can't have any Wave issues or anything?
Oh, yeah, I would say, let's see, I would get started with using Axe if you aren't already, because that will automate a lot of it for you, just like with Prettier or with other ESLint things, like other JavaScript style things. Axe will do the same thing for you, and it can just fix errors for you. So that's a really good one to get started with. Wave is a good tool. I don't know, I guess it depends on what the challenges are. I know at my company, like our website is terrible. It's abysmally horrible. and we make baby steps, and like individual components are very accessible and nice, but like the whole application is just terrible. It really is. So so you get into situations where you feel a little bit in over your head, and you just have to make progress, basically. But I do like Wave. Like Wave is a really good tool.
Do you feel like you trust it, I guess, that if it's...
I do.
Yeah.
Between Wave and between navigating with keyboard, it does a good, I mean, it does a good job with like color contrast. Yeah, I think it's a really good tool.
Cool.
Is it also like a extension that you can just download for the browser, like you said? It's like a free extension that you...
Yeah, it's free. Yeah, it's a free extension, and I think it's for Firefox too, I want to say. Probably the best thing is to hire a company to do your accessibility audit and to help you remediate. That's probably the number one best thing you can do.
Speaking of audits, like how does, like when you run Lighthouse on your sites, how is that? How do you, I guess, like read the information that it's giving you? Because it just gives you like a score, basically, right?
Yeah, it does give you a little bit of information. Let's see. I'm gonna do one. Let's see if it'll. Okay. So this is on the site that I'm working on. It's telling me that the Aria IDs are not unique. So it will give you specific information for remediation. It's not as, like, you can see that this gave me different information than Wave did. So I would say Lighthouse is not going to catch as many things as Wave will in general. It'll also give you good performance metrics, which is also really important for accessibility. That's not something that I'm very knowledgeable about, like how to make your website super performant. That's not my skill set. But Lighthouse is also pretty good about giving those kind of metrics and give you tips on how to make things faster.
Probably the nicest thing about Lighthouse's accessibility is the fact that you don't have to install Lighthouse. It's already installed in Chrome. So
yeah,
it's kind of a good place to start. But then
it's there.
The other tools are kind of better. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing, like getting started, just do something, make a step toward making your work better and making it better for everyone. I think that's the takeaway. Like, think about it and do something about it. There will be times when you can't do everything, but taking a step is better than not taking a step at all. Cool. Other comments, people chatting, sorry. Oh yeah, so Fable Labs does Zapier, right?
Yeah, we've had them audit our site before, and it was really interesting watching the videos that they recorded because the people who are doing it are like very proficient with screen readers and like they know what they're doing. Whereas if I'm doing something, it's kind of a little bit more like me fumbling through it, you know, but like it's very just informative to watch someone who really knows what they're doing audit your site.
Yep. It was interesting at the University of Minnesota to work with somebody who is a developer who was blind. And so to watch them work was just super, it was amazing to see like how fast they can process that information orally, right? As opposed to with their eyes. It's just a very different way to navigate the world, navigate a website, navigate their job, right? Very interesting. And yeah, using screen reader assistive technology, something that you're not used to using all the time, is very challenging. Like the first million times you try it, it's very hard. You can, play with the controls, but it is really eye-opening. It's revealing to see somebody who knows what they're doing with those technologies and how to work with them.
Cool, great presentation.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everybody.
Woohoo!
All right, I'm office hours again this week, so you'll be seeing me. Please do not be strangers. Please be sure to reach out for help. If you have questions about process or about, you know, can we leave this aside, or what would be a good path to move through these issues, don't be afraid to reach out to any and all of us. We, you know, we would love to help. So excited to see what you come up with. All right.
Cool.
Take care, everybody.
Cool.
Thank you.
See
Have a
ya.
great
Thank y'all.
week. Great work.
Bye.
Super excited.
Yeah, great presentation.